The Crystal Charter, Daughter of the Red Seal. Chapter 25. She's waking up. Elsie's shrill voice pierced through the warmth that wrapped around Maebe. She felt like a newborn, swaddled and confused at the world around her. In a hazy fuzz, her eyes opened to the safe familiarity of her room. Dark pink sheets covered her, and shapes huddled around the posts of her bed. Deep teal walls and white-framed paintings cradled her against a nightmare. She had to wake up. Every bone in her body was protesting. Something had happened, something terrible. The blurry shapes that took form when Maebe blinked, blanketing them in black before opening her eyes to a clearer picture. "You're right. She's awake," Jorgen repeated. His calmer tones did nothing to stop the dread twisting her gut. "What happened?" she croaked through an exhausted voice. As the words tumbled from her lips, memories of before she blacked out slammed into her conscious memory. "What did I do?" she screamed in her mind. "You collapsed in the kitchen, miss," Elsie chipped in, looking a little calmer than she had moments before. "It's been a long day. Perhaps a bit too much has been piled onto you recently." Maebe struggled to breathe. She closed her eyes to focus on inhaling deeply, but an empty smile appeared behind her lids, and she threw the curtains of her eyes open and fixed them on Elsie. "What?" she gasped out. "How long was I out?" Perhaps an hour, no more. We sent for a doctor. He'll be here short." "I'm fine. I don't need a doctor." She struggled to pull herself upright in her bed. The sheets tucked around her were meant to be comfort, but they were constricting. A sharp stab pulled awareness to her palm as she put her weight on it, but she daren't open her hand. Not with Jorgen and Elsie in the room. "I'm just tired," she lied. "Miss, you sail tomorrow morning," Jorgen reminded her, as if she could forget. "Then have the god's cursed doctor sent in the morning, so he can report to the king that I'm fine," she snapped at him. She wanted to be alone, and to look at what she was holding. If they had already sent for a doctor, then it was likely that the king was already aware something had happened to her. She knew she would have to see one, but not now. Morning was soon enough. "As you wish. Do you need anything else before we leave you to rest?" Jorgen asked. She wanted to be alone, but another need reigned up. "Water," she demanded. "There's some here, mistress." Elsie picked up a glass and handed it to her from soft hands. Big, worried eyes watched Maebe as she drank. Then Elsie refilled it and left it on the bedside table. Jorgen turned to leave. His livery looked crinkled from the busy day, but he had kept his silver-streaked hair neat. "Jorgen," she questioned, and he stopped in his tracks. "Could you send Cert in?" He froze, lost in thought. "I'm sorry, miss. Who?" He frowned as if he recollected the name, but if it flickered deep down, it still remained untouchable. "Lady, certainly," Maebe clarified with a husky voice. "Was she someone in attendance today?" His voice sounded unconvinced by his own question. Jorgen was dedicated to his job. He took pride in his life's work. Every name on the list of those in attendance at her father's funeral would have been stored in his mind. "No," her gut clenched. "I think I'm just tired. I'm not making any sense." She offered him a weak smile, and squeezed her hand tighter around the object she was holding. "Well, good night, miss." He bowed and backed out of the door. Elsie stood with a hand on the handle. "I'll be in early in the morning to get you ready for the doctor. Oh, and a note came to say your bags have already been put aboard Sumine 3, so that's one worry off your mind." She ducked her head in a small curtsy and stepped backwards, pulling the door shut behind her. Shaking, Maebe raised her hand up to her face. Bathed with the faint glow of crystal light, it looked ghostly, pale, slim. One finger at a time, she uncurled her hand, tasting her sweat in the air. Crescent moons marked the flesh of her palm, where her nails had bit into soft skin. There it sat, in her haunting grasp, black as the night beyond the curtains, a tainted gem. She closed her fist around it again and clutched it to her chest, muttering curses. This moment couldn't be real. She would have never poisoned someone. Certainly irritated may be true, but she was unwelcome, breeze-brained, and provincial. But maybe wouldn't have chosen to hurt her. Would I? "This can't be happening," she spoke out loud. Calming tones in her voice allowed her to muster confidence, the same she used on her horse when he spooked. This was all a bad dream, brought about by the weight of her father's death and her elevated position, a harmless fantasy that she had indulged in too far, and now it was time to finish it. "Wake up. Come on, this is a dream," she repeated. Panic rose inside her, just a little. Her breath caught, and her brow twitched against squeezed shut eyes. Magic was used in the Green Kingdom to help people. It was the base of everything she had been taught by Charis and Hannah, everything she believed. Crystals allowed power to be shared. They were weakened against the unwilling and corrupted with ease when used to inflict pain. They were safe. Only, Maebe had used a potion. The swirling, iridescent liquid flooded her thoughts. She had seen countless types of potions in the main. Hedge witch brews of questionable quality, said to restore health, wealth, offset the effects of unlucky stars, restore the physical aspects of love. A potion for everything, and most of it stomach acid-inducing garbage. She knew from years of studying Red Seal lore that the best potions were brewed by the night witches, and many nature witch brews were of high quality. Even if she intended to do something certainly, she wouldn't have used a knockoff hedge witch potion. Unless... It bewitched me. Her mind raced, thinking of what could have happened. The problem was that she had never heard of a crystal being used with a potion. She had no precedent to understand the effects of such a merging. The witch had said it was a memory potion. True. It seemed to have wiped the memories of Jorgen and Elsie, who didn't even recognize Certainly's name. She had forgotten her too, until... the crystal. She picked up the crystal. Her memories of Certainly had flooded back to her in an overwhelming wave in the kitchen, after she had picked up the crystal. Logic swarmed in her mind. The potion must have been corrupted by the era shard, and the crystal was the result of using that potion. But from that flaw, she could undo the magic she had unwittingly cast. That hope died with the idea of touching every person in the Green Kingdom with a crystal. It was impossible. Her room, though. The crystal may have erased Certainly from people's minds, but it can't have erased her everywhere. Where was she? Before she knew what she was doing, Maebe had charged down the hallway, the dark weight of the corrupted crystal clasped tight in one hand and a glowing light staff in the other. She flung open Certainly's door to find the ivory room, restored to its natural colour scheme and flocked walls, reflecting the gem light back at her in mocking patterns. It certainly hadn't changed the ivory room much when she moved into Spaceth Manor. She had placed her belongings alongside that which was already there. Her hairbrush had been added to the dressing table, filled with bottles and keep chests that had already been housed there. But her hairbrush was gone. Around the house she hadn't changed anything. She had just flowed into the empty spaces. Undisturbing but ever present. Maebe had resented her for it. But she had never intruded. The bed was freshly made with pale linens and gold pillows, and a thin canopy hung overhead with shining crystal tassel to aid a peaceful sleep by minimizing outside noise. The bedside table had once held Certainly's most valuable item, a flat slice of crystal, burned with magical images of her parents in front of her home at Seacrest. Gone. She squeezed her eyelids together, blinking away the nightmare. Just open your eyes and everything will be back in place. When she looked again, nothing had changed. Maebe yanked on the doors to Certainly's armoire, searching for any trace of the woman. It should have been filled with vibrant dresses bedecked with ugly lace, but it was empty, waiting for someone to use. She slid down the wall, resting her head against the cold surface. Everything was gone. The power of that tiny shard had been enough. There, in the back, hidden on the bottom shelf, not empty, a small parcel rested in the shadows. Maebe's trembling hands placed the light staff on the floor, and she crawled over to lift the package gently. She knocked over a moth crystal, which would have protected any piece of clothing shut away behind the doors. And she sat cross-legged on the floor beside the light and held the package on her lap. The seal was familiar. The ribbon holding it together fell apart and fluttered to the ground. Inside was the night blue cloak, the border rich with gold and silver needlework of constellations. It was the cloak Maebe had ordered for a protesting Certainly. A cloak she had never wanted and never used. Ouch, Maebe muttered as she pinched her arm. She did it again, certain she was drawing blood. Anything to wake up. Disbelief struck her numb. In one hand, she held the cloak of a woman who didn't exist to anybody but her, and in the other, she held the crystal which could resurrect her memory, but condemn Maebe. Wake up! Cracks shattered the mirror that Maebe threw the crystal at in a fit of anger. As fast as she threw it, she was on her hands and knees scrambling across the floor to claw for the useless hunk of rock. Cuts shredded the tender points of her palms, still not fully healed from Elpis, until she found it. Heartbreaking sobs broke free from her chest. Summoning enough strength to crawl away from the broken mirror, Maebe cradled the black gem in both of her bleeding hands and covered herself with the night cloak, shutting out the outside world and shuddering under the embroidered stars.